Shalom from Jerusalem. This is Israel at War, an update on day 454 of the war, which started on October the 7th, 2023, in the horrific onslaught and massacre by Hamas, and soon expanded to other fronts. I am Amir Oren, sitting in for the traveling Jonathan Hessen, and we have three very distinguished panelists. So what we have in store today is something different. It's going to be an auction. We have three issues: Syria, Lebanon, and Gaza. And I'm going to give each of you the chance to bid on any of the three, but it's going to be rigged in a way because, Miri, you are going to bid first. What issue would you like to tackle?
I'm going to try and tackle the Gaza Strip, even though everybody expects me to tackle Syria. I think that that's the one that we need to be talking about.
Okay. Mark, what is your favorite subject among the three?
Well, sign me up for Syria.
Okay. In that case, I believe Doron will choose Lebanon. Something tells me that this is going to be his choice.
Yeah, but knowing me, it would be hard to stay in Lebanon, probably also to my colleagues, because everything is tied to everything in our area. But let's start with Lebanon.
Yes, and all of you can jump in and respond to your colleagues whenever you see fit, even after the show is over. So, Miri, Colonel Eisen, what's the state of play in Gaza today? We are 18 days from the onset of the Trump administration. There were hopes that during the transition from Biden to Trump, there will be a breakthrough, but the chances right now look very slim. What's holding up the negotiations?
100 hostages have been held for 454 days. In its own way, it's inconceivable. The U.S. servants, the ones who worked at the U.S. Embassy, who were taken in Tehran in 1979, as far as I recall, were released after 444 days, and we're already at 454 days. And I say that because when we look at it from the Israeli perspective, we're still stuck on October 7th. From the international perspective, it's not like we hear about the hostages. What we hear is about that multi-front war. I want to go back to the Gaza Strip. I feel that what we're seeing right now is that Hamas is, in a way, reasserting itself. That change that we've talked about so often over the last year and 2 months, that if there is nobody in charge in the Gaza Strip, chaos absolutely, to me, only helps Hamas. That means that they still have the mobility that the underground subterranean capabilities give them. It is an incredibly challenging job to destroy that underground capability, and that means that they've managed to keep a structure which has not been destroyed, not the military one, certainly not the civil one. And I say that because it's 2025, and I think that we need to look forward. We need to talk about 100 hostages, and we need to talk about what happens when Hamas is still there, because in chaos and with nobody else there, that's who's taking over.
But Miri, in international conflicts as well as in labor disputes, at the start of negotiations, it seems as if you cannot reconcile the contradictory positions of the various parties, and eventually, most of the times, you do reach a compromise. Is it probable that such a compromise, some formula, will be found here between Hamas, which insists on a total cessation of the war, and Israel, which at least up to now insists it will not end the war?
We would end the war if they would bring back 100 people. We would end the war if they would bring back everybody who's alive, everybody who's dead, and if we would actually know what happened to all of the 100 that we think are there. As I say, think, because there are enough within them that we really haven't had any kind of contact from October 7th, 2023. So I do think that. And I don't think Hamas will do that, because Hamas does not view the hostages as human beings. Hamas doesn't view Israelis as human beings. Hamas looks at them only as a bargaining chip. And what they want to show is that at the end of the day, they exist, that they managed to get back their own people for Israelis, and they don't want to be destroyed, which is why they want the cessation of any kind of violent activity. And I say it sadly, because at the end of the day, that's like a position where we keep coming back to stage one. And we need to talk about that. This cannot keep on going on. We keep trying to destroy more and more of Hamas. And at the end of the day, we're not getting the hostages back. And Hamas still exists there. And we need to look that in the face.
General Kimmett, let me launch at you a MIRV, a multiple independent reentry vehicle question regarding Syria. If we tie the first part of it to what Colonel Eisen just said, you have only one person who disappeared in Syria, Austin Tice. It's been more than 3 weeks since the revolution took over Damascus, and yet the new leaders have not found Tice yet. Perhaps they are waiting for President Trump to take office in order to give it to him in return for something. So that's the first question. How come someone disappears in Syria, the regime has collapsed, and he is not yet found? And add to that the resurgence of Daesh, of ISIS. We have seen the New Orleans terror act, perhaps what happened in Las Vegas overnight, the Tesla vehicle which exploded is also part of that. We have heard of a threat against AIPAC, the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee. And one should add to that there are 2,000 American servicemen now in Syria. And we know that the inclination voiced by President Trump in his first term was to end the American presence in Syria. So please tie it all in and tell us what's going to happen in Syria.
Well, first of all, let's start with your questions one by one. It's highly problematic to determine whether Austin Tice is still alive or not. There are suggestions, particularly from the family, that they have proof of life. As you dig into those elements of proof, you really have to wonder. So I think that, as you say, it could well be a gift from al-Shara and his people to President Trump on day one. It could be like many of the hostages in Gaza we fear. They, in fact, may be unaccounted for or may be, in fact, deceased. The resurgence of ISIS, I agree. ISIS is under a lot of pressure right now. It could be well that they're taking the battlefield from the physical to the cyber to the social media as a last-ditch effort to try to inspire warfare, not only in Syria but elsewhere. Or it could simply be that the United States' view on Syria is completely wrong, and there's still an active and viable presence both on the ground in Syria, on the ground in Iraq, and in the airwaves, proselytizing and trying to attract new recruits. I don't think we really know right now. It is certainly the case that what we saw happen in New Orleans and possibly happen inside of Las Vegas is a foreboding of what's to come, and that ISIS really is still an active organization. 2,000
and the American
troops
presence
in the north. It's very clear that the United States has assisted the Syrian Defense Forces in this latest post-Assad vacuum. They've taken advantage of that opportunity to push all the way to Bukamal on the border. But you're right. There is a question about what happens when President Trump comes in. Yes, he was one that advocated for and ordered the withdrawal of American troops in 2020 before he left office, which led to the resignation of Jim Mattis and Brett McGurk, but then was later convinced to stay in Syria to protect the oil fields, recognizing that any post-Assad element needed to have that oil. And quite frankly, the Kurds, if they were going to set up their independent region of Rojava, would need that oil as well. So what's going to happen? I think there are two strands of thought. As you said, President Trump will have a natural inclination to pull out of Syria in his mantra of let's end wars, not start wars. But we also know that people such as his national security advisor, Mike Waltz, is very pro-Kurd and would like to see at least a federal system in the new Syria, which would permit, like in Iraq, a Syrian Kurdistan, which has some level of autonomy. So we'll see how that showdown works out. I don't know if Pete Hegseth has any particular view on it, but it is certainly the case that there is somewhat of a divergent view between the president and Mike Waltz on this issue. And
Pete
then there are
Hegseth,
other issues about Syria in general that we can go into later, particularly the relationship with Turkey. But if there's any time, perhaps we can talk about that.
you mentioned Pete Hegseth, who is the nominee for Secretary of Defense. We already heard from Ahmed Ashara, also known as Giuliani. He said that he is against a federated Syria. Maybe this is his opening position. We will see. For the time being, General Gavish, you chose out of your free volition to handle Lebanon. So we are only 4 weeks away from the end of the 60-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, but actually Israel and Hezbollah. The mechanism which was supposed to be set up is nominally there, but not really working, at least not at full capacity. And the Israeli Defense Forces always find new munitions, new positions. Sometimes they have to hit a vehicle by Hezbollah trying to move and the arsenal from one point to another. What's going to happen in late January?
Well, what's going to happen? That's a great question, Amir. But really looking at it from an Israeli interest, and I believe this is what we should look at. First, we have to remember we are not fighting Lebanon. It is not an issue between Israel and Lebanon. The war is against Hezbollah. The Lebanese are there, but the war was against mainly against Hezbollah. Of course, we expect the Lebanese to take part on the new arrangement of their own country. We hope for them that they will take charge on their own country. And this is for the Lebanese. But from an Israeli interest, when we're looking toward Lebanon, we have to remember that our number one, and again, this is the goal of our war, is to bring back the Israelis that were, there were refugees in their own country, left the north, to bring them that while they feel safely to live in the northern part of Israel. So we cannot say that we are there yet. This is exactly what we hope that would happen with the time. You are right that it is not 100%, but it is still, in a way, a quiet border during the last 60 days. From the Israel, relatively quiet. From the Israeli point of view, I think what is behind of our all heads is the lesson learned from this war, is that we won't allow capabilities and a threat that would be threatening our population, of course, in the northern part, but also in other places around us. So if there is something who is popping up, if there is someone who is threatening the civilians or even the military, we are going to tackle it, and this is exactly what Israel is doing in our northern border. Of course, when we're looking at the Hezbollah probably it is now in its weakest point. It was heavily damaged by Israel, but we understand that, and this is, of course, the connection between things that what is happening in Syria. It is also a blow for the Hezbollah. Basically, the route for smuggling weapons with the help of the Iranians, is being blocked by the Julani and his organization, let's put it this way. And so it is now, I think, a point that probably it is the interest of Hezbollah to keep this peace and try to reorganize. And of course, from the Israeli point, as I said, what we are looking at is our interest, bringing back our civilians to the northern part of Israel peacefully, and to make sure that all those arrangements that hopefully would be put in place would be allowing us to bring them back safely.
Thank you. Colonel Eisen, if we can move back for a moment to General Kimmitt's domain, area of responsibility in Syria, the IDF has confirmed yesterday the news, which were up to now only unofficially recognized, acknowledged by the military, regarding a daring commando raid into Syria on September the 8th, that is almost 4 months ago, where the Israeli Air Force Commando Unit Shaldag took over a secret Iranian-built facility in which precision-guided weapons were built by the Iranians for Syria and Hezbollah. And this took place some 100 kilometers north of the Israeli border. It was, of course, a joint operation by military intelligence, by the Air Force, and also the Navy, which gave some fire coverage from the sea. It was successful, but Israel at the time chose not to acknowledge it. And the question is, this used to be one of the hallmarks of the Israeli defense establishment, not only the IDF, but also Mossad and Shabak and others. Why did we see so little of it over the last 15 months, which mostly dragged into a war of attrition?
So you're asking that about the one that we talked about, Emil. That doesn't mean that there aren't additional ones that we didn't talk about. I'll remind our viewers something that we've spoken about since the overt war against Hezbollah started pretty much from the end of July, when Israel started to eliminate a lot of the top commanders. And then we have the Beeper attack that Israel has semi-taken responsibility before and had not done in the past. The Israeli defense minister, Katz, took responsibility for the killing of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. There are other additional types of attacks that took place, but just inside Lebanon, Israel said when we initiated the ground operation that for months before that, we had been doing quiet operations in Lebanon. Not everything needs to be talked about all of the time. When I talk about all of the different figures, both high-ranking and in addition, the units themselves and the bases, there are hundreds of attacks that nobody has taken responsibility for. There are figures that were killed during this war that Israel did not take responsibility in. Maybe we did it, and maybe somebody else did it, but that's part of the covert war. The question for me, Amir, is why are we telling about ones that we have done? What are we trying to show when we expose operations that we did that were successful, that are important, and we did not expose them for almost 4 months after they were done? And it's that sort of thing where I say right now, Israel is trying to build a new kind of deterrence. It's a deterrence both against the new, whatever we're going to call it, government, regime, dictator. He's not yet a dictator, but I don't yet know what Ahmed al-Shara will be and what that will become. But we're very much trying to show whoever is in Syria that we know how to act there, not just in the way that we did after December 8th, but also in a way that we did long before December 8th. And I say that because that's a message. We're sending out that message to the Iranians and to Hezbollah, and for that matter to Hamas and the Houthis and all of the other proxy and non-proxy forces about capabilities that we do have that we don't always toot our horn. I'm not always sure I agree with the way that we sometimes toot our horn. We don't have to take responsibility for everything we do, but every once in a while, I think you need to do so, because otherwise, they don't actually know that you have that capability, and they should. And in this case, I think that that's one of the reasons that this would have come out.
But Miri, you're one of Israel's best public information experts. And you know that in addition to this external dimension, there is also the internal one, both vis-a-vis the civilian population to take pride in their youth, in the elite units, but also the esprit de corps, the morale within the unit. They want to have some credit for their exploits. Isn't this also one of the considerations?
It's certainly going to be a consideration at the end. Don't we always say everything is politics? But I put that into 2025. Amir, we are in a new world. The way I look at it right now, the changes that happened in Syria, for me, as somebody who most of my adult life looked at Syria, and I've been looking at it from 1980, so not from 1970 when Assad took over, but from 1980. For 44 years, I followed Syria of Assad. And from December 8th, it's not Syria of Assad anymore. And the ramifications of this are broad. So we both need it for ourselves. I think it's also about rehabilitating some of the lost trust in Israeli capabilities because of what is the absolute failure of October 7th. And I don't want to diminish that one. But add into it that from October 7th, we've had amazing acts of intelligence, of operations, of capabilities, and of bravery that we need to know both for ourselves and to tell it out to the war. So it's a combo of all of the above.
So you say that you go back to the Assad dynasty as someone who goes even further back to the Salah Jadid, Nuruddin al-Attasi regime, with Hafez Assad being only the defense minister and Air Force commander. The 54-year of the Assad dynasty was the aberration. Now Syria is back to its normal being split. But both General Kimmett and General Gavish, if we can have your views as we wind up this particular conversation regarding the cooperation between the US military, especially the Central Command, CENTCOM, and the IDF, as we look back at the last 15 months. General Kimmett, please.
Yeah, I would say that one of the wisest decisions made by the Department of Defense was to change the Uniform Command Plan boundaries and bring Israel into the CENTCOM area of operations rather than the EUCOM area of operations. Militarily, it was as consequential as a diplomatic effort to move the embassy or to acknowledge the embassy inside of Jerusalem. It just makes sense for a cohesive strategy looking at the entire Middle East, recognizing that much of the Middle East emanates, much of the issues of the Middle East emanate in that relationship with Israel. So I'm just glad to see that the last 15 months have made the relationship between the U.S. military and the IDF much more cohesive, much more effective, and candidly much more successful.
And General Gavish, one of the top priority issues in CENTCOM, as well as in the CENTCOM-IDF relationship, has been integrated missile defense, your own topic. And we have seen proof of purchase for that with the various intercepts of ballistic missiles fired from Iran, Yemen, and elsewhere. Some of the intercepts being done by the US, some by the British, other allies, and most of them by the Israeli Air Force. So has that worked out the way you expected?
Well, Amir, we have a saying that I believe I already quoted here during the last few months, and this is partners in peace, brothers in war. And this is how do we see the relations with the CENTCOM. We literally, when we talk to each other, we called ourselves brothers. And this is how tight is this relations, and this is how tight is this cooperation. When it comes to the air and missile defense, of course, we are talking about interception of threats coming from, as you said, Iran, Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of projectiles, UAVs, ballistic missiles that the vast majority of them were intercepted both by Israel forces and also the coalition led by the United States. And lately, we could say that it is quite impressive to see that the THAAD system that was deployed to Israel is also taking part in the defense of Israel. And this is very important from a professional point of view. Of course, what we've seen here in the region for us and our US brothers from CENTCOM, this is I would say unprecedented. Never in the world, never in the military history, there was something like this, that all the array of defense against ballistic missiles was fully applied, and this is really something to appreciate and to learn from for the future. I think that we can't end a discussion about our area without saying the word Iran. At the end of the day, we have to remember that basically almost everything starts and ends in Iran. Iran is the destabilizer of our region, and we hope that if I'm, looking at what was or listening to what was said by Miri, and we really hope that the future of the Mediterranean would be shaped differently, and at the end of the day, Iran would be once again a country which is with a great history, flourishing, and not a country which is destabilizing the whole region.
Yes, but Iran will be dealt with in future programs, because we don't want to solve the problem right now and end up with almost nothing to talk about here. So let's save it. We will surely return to the topic. For the time being, General Gavish, General Kimmett, Colonel Eisen, thank you very much. This has been Israel at War, an update from TV7 News Israel. We will be back for another edition early next week. For the time being, shalom from Jerusalem.
Jerusalem Studio, now available on Spotify.